U.S. Secretary of State discussed with the United Nations Special Envoy peace efforts in Yemen. United Nations officials say 10,000 children have been killed or maimed during Yemen's war. Houthi rebels' escalation uproots more than 44,000 civilians in Ma'rib. Welcome to Yemen Today TV. This is the English news with me, Rana Swalam. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken discussed in a phone call with the United Nations Special Envoy for Yemen, Hans Grunberg, peace efforts in Yemen. The two sides stressed that all parties must participate in a serious peace process without preconditions, along with securing a comprehensive ceasefire. They also discussed urgent humanitarian priorities in the country. U.S. Secretary of State reiterated that resolving the conflict in Yemen remains a top priority for U.S. foreign policy. The UN said that more than 10,000 children in Yemen have been killed or injured due to war. UNICEF spokesman reported that the figures are likely to be more. According to the UN figures, a total of 3,455 children were killed and more than 6,600 injured during fighting in Yemen between 2015 up to last month. Local sources in Abdiyah reported that Houthis killed and injured dozens of citizens after controlling some areas in the district. In the neighboring district of Al-Juba, sources indicated that militia executed a person with special needs. This coincided with the execution of an elderly man who refused to submit to their orders. In Ma'rib too, government forces liberated strategic military positions on the fronts south of the governorate. A military source said that there were widespread collapses in the ranks among the militia, adding that the rebels were inflicted with heavy casualties in lives and equipment. New waves of displacement have occurred during the last couple of weeks because of the Houthi offensive in Ma'rib. A human rights report documented that more than 3,000 families have moved from their places since September. More on this story is within this report.
Houthi brutal siege on Abdiyah has caused an alarming humanitarian disaster. The UN Office for Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs confirmed that 44,000 people were displaced this year by the military escalation by Houthi militias in Yemen. The uprooting continues as the government warns against the deteriorating situation in Ma'rib, west and south. Around 4,000 families are stuck in Ma'rib's Abdiyah district, where government forces are fighting off Houthi militia. This comes as the Yemeni Foreign Minister Ahmed bin Mubarak warned of the dangerous repercussions of the Houthis' escalating offensive against civilians and displaced people in Ma'rib. During a meeting with the chief of the International Organization for Migration, bin Mubarak said that the Houthis' military escalation exacerbates the difficult humanitarian conditions of the displaced, especially in Ma'rib, which is home to more than 2 million displaced people. He also warned that the international community's disregard for such practices allows the Houthis to commit more violence and violations against civilians, which compounds the displacement crisis, forces displacement of civilians, and increases their human suffering. In September, Ma'rib's south witnessed the displacement of over 3,000 families. While bin Mubarak praised the role played by the IOM in alleviating the tragic conditions faced by the displaced, he pointed to the need for intensifying the organization's work in the interim capital, Aden, and other liberated governorates. Meanwhile, in its weekly situation overview on the humanitarian situation in Yemen, OCHA stated that intense fighting continues across Ma'rib, with hostilities particularly prevalent in Sirwah, Rahaba, and Mahliya districts. The report revealed that since the beginning of the Houthi military escalation in January, around 44,000 people have been displaced. As for Abdiyah in southern Ma'rib, around 4,000 families are stuck in war zones. More so, the report revealed that local sources had spotted heavy sniper fire targeting convoys transporting medical supplies and essential commodities to Abdiyah. Houthi war crimes in Abdiyah have been committed before in some areas and can be repeated in others. It seems like cities in Yemen would fall one after another in the hold of the dragon, while condemnation seems to be the only tactic the international community has in hand to pressure on Houthis.
A medical source at Al Kuwait Hospital in Sana'a said that the hospital receives more than 100 wounded Houthis per week. The source said that the number of Houthis casualties is increasing as the fighting intensifies between the militia and the government forces. A second source pointed out that the militia confiscates the phones of the medical staff and warned them not to give the information about the number of wounded. Joint forces advanced on a number of fronts in the northwest of Al-Dala. A military source reported that violent clashes erupted centered on Al-Fakhr sector, where the joint forces took over a number of sites from the rebels. The military source pointed out that the Houthi militia suffered heavy losses in equipment and lives. Still in Al-Dala, joint forces carried out raids on Houthi militia positions west of Qataba. The raids resulted in the killing and wounding of dozens of Houthi elements and the destruction of their vehicles. As the war continues, collapsing healthcare affects all people, the most vulnerable of which are children and women, who suffered much amid the ongoing war. More in the following report.
The Houthi militia has made everyone suffer in Yemen. Women's access to health care in general is more limited than it is for men, and recent reports indicate that the situation is getting worse with women, often arriving at health facilities with life-threatening complications, including obstructed or prolonged labor too late to achieve no positive result. According to the United Nations International Migration and Global Health, the reasons for women's low access to health care are the general lack of financial resources. The high cost of medical care and operations are between $160 to $400. The lack of fuel that leads to increased transportation costs and roadblocks making other necessities more important over women's health for their place in the family and society. Delays in seeking health care also put women at risk of complications and other adverse health consequences. In the event of complications in pregnancy and childbirth, the risks are not limited to women. Rather, it extends to their children, who may be born with a compromised immune system or other conditions that affect their health and well-being. Reports also show that a number of women receiving vaccines against the coronavirus is much lower than men. Reasons include timing and availability of vaccination centers. The centers are only open for 3 to 4 hours a day due to the high temperatures and lack of electricity. This leads to long lines and waiting times, making the process more difficult for women who are not used to spending long periods outside the home. Women's vaccination areas are also not fully exploited. For this reason, resources supposedly intended for women are used to vaccinate men, and since the primary caregivers are women, they are more likely to be exposed to the virus if it penetrates the home and more likely to spread it within the family. The suffering of these women keeps aggravating on a daily basis, yet there are no changes in helping with their difficult situations.
The Houthi militia forced students of Sana'a University to participate in its celebrations of the Prophet's birthday. Academic sources in Sana'a said that students were forced to attend the celebrations under threats of punishment. The rebels allocated buses to transport students to the religious celebration. For more than a month, the Houthis have been preparing to celebrate the Prophet's birthday by coloring the streets of the capital Sana'a in green and forcing all shops and private companies to hang green cloth, along with forcing shop owners to pay royalties. In addition, the rebels make use of the religious occasion to mass people and send more fighters to the fronts. More on this story is within this report.
Hatred, destruction and killing, meaning that are far from any religious core values and ideals. These concepts are called upon by the Houthi rebels who use religious occasions to promote their followers to join the war. Instead of using religious events to group people together under love, fraternity and solidarity, the Houthi rebels in Yemen do the very opposite. The rebels who captured the Yemeni capital 7 years ago and who are continuing their illegitimate war against the Yemeni people, culture and civilization lure people, especially juveniles, into going into war. The rebels entice those young people that they will enter paradise through this fighting. Instead of qualifying them to be good citizens and well-educated Yemenis, they send them to the fronts only to make a Houthi victory that will benefit no one but the rebels. Politicizing religious occasions, in addition, is a hallmark of the rebels in order to drain Yemeni pockets and to siphon their life-sustaining incomes. The latest example is their use of the Prophet's birth celebration as a way to gain more money. Usually, this celebration calls in the Yemenis the memories and days related to peace and mercy spread by the Prophet. This, however, is totally abused. The rebels are forcing people in the areas under their control to raise money under the pretext of holding a religious occasion, while, on the contrary, they not only draw off Yemeni money but also stoke the war through these donations. Sectarianism and racism may increase due to the Houthi mindset that blocks any religious diversity in which Yemen has been living in for centuries.
Coming next. Kidney and Liver Union in Aden organizes a rally over shortage of medicine.
راتب الواحد 120 ألف والكيس الدقيق ب18 ألف والكيس السكر اليوم ب20 ألف. كم يعني بيعطي هذا الراتب كامل كيس سكر وكيس دقيق؟
المواطن اليمني يعيش في أزمة إنسانية وغذائية مؤلمة من غلاء الأسعار وفحشة الأسعار وغلاء الصرف والعملة الأجنبية في البلد.
حالتي الحين حالة لما ندي احنا شلقينا ما نقدرش ناكل الأكل داخل ما احنا بحاجة صعبة.
Welcome back. The Association of Kidney and Liver Transplantation in Aden organized a protest against the lack of medicines. Protesters stressed that if the Ministry of Health did not respond to their demands, they would carry out another protest next week. More details are within this report.
Pain and fear among the Yemeni citizens is increasing. The lack of medicine and their high prices forced kidney transplant patients to go out and stand here in front of the Ministry of Public Health and Population and also in front of the World Health Organization office in the temporary capital of Aden to express their pain and their ongoing suffering.
We ask to provide special treatment for the kidney transplant patient and live normally. Medicines like mifrotic and cyclosporine are needed after doing the kidney and liver transplant. The Ministry of Health stopped giving us medicine for a period of time. They started giving us medicine in these small plastic bags. This plastic bag has about 5 to 6 pills for about 5 to 6 days without us knowing the name of the medicine or expiry date.
This is how kidney transplant patients today are suffering after they sold everything they owned in order to travel abroad for a kidney transplantation. They return to their homeland with the hope of meeting the health and treatment services that are given to the patient after kidney transplantation. However, they meet the bitter reality.
I had a surgery a year ago in Turkey. Doctors offered to give me medicine. Those doctors don't know me and I don't know them. Yet, they offered to help and provide me with medicine. When we come to our Yemeni local doctors, they don't have mercy on us. I need to take an injection, which costs 10,000 riyals. I don't have this money. What can I do?
Trouble, misery, and deprivation. It's matched by the disregard for lives, neglect by the concerned authorities, which made these patients struggle with bitterness of pain and be surrounded by fear of the unknown. They raise banners denouncing the provision of their treatment demands and the improvement of their health conditions.
We stand here today in solidarity for the patients suffering for years now. How there is no medicine available? If it is provided in very little portions. We call on the Ministry of Health and the authorities to provide the needed medicine and give the patient the right amount of doses they need. Now they receive only half of the dose they needed.
In light of government agencies ignoring everything that is happening, in the reality of kidney transplant patients and the suffering they go through with the lack of medicines that can alleviate the pain of these patients and touch their concerns and needs that secure them to stay alive. Yemeni citizens want the authorities to hear their voices and help them with their suffering, yet no help until now is being offered.
The Ministry of Higher Education said it will start transferring 2/4 of the dues for Yemeni students abroad. According to the ministry, the transfer of the student dues will start within the next few days. The Yemeni students abroad have suffered from financial cuts in their fees for the past 15 months. The United Nations reported that fuel prices in Houthi-controlled areas have increased in the past month by 30 to 40%. On the other hand, according to the World Food Programme, the value of the Yemeni rial continued to deteriorate in the government-controlled areas. The rial broke the barrier of 1,000 rials to the dollar on July 27. The National Committee Against Coronavirus announced 19 new cases of the COVID-19 in 5 governorates. Also, 6 deaths were recorded, plus 31 recovered cases. With the current updates, the total confirmed cases are 9,575, including 1,813 deaths and 6,115 cases of recovery. Here's a reminder of the main headlines. U.S. Secretary of State discussed with the United Nations Special Envoy peace efforts in Yemen. United Nations officials say 10,000 children have been killed or maimed during Yemen's war. Houthi rebels' escalation uproots more than 44,000 civilians in Ma'rib. This is the end of the news. Thank you for watching. Have a great day.